You ever have one of those moments where the whole world just glitches? Like the air gets too thick, your heartbeat becomes deafening, and suddenly nothing feels real. That's exactly what happened to me the second I stepped into that office and saw Linda from HR sitting there with her perfect little folder, and my manager, Greg, with that fake, apologetic smile. "David," Linda began, smoothing her skirt, "thanks for making time on such short notice." Like I had a choice. She slid a paper across the table. The soft scratch of it on the cheap laminate desk way louder than it should have been. I glanced down and felt my stomach hit the floor. A 50% pay cut. Effective immediately. No warning. No discussion. "We're restructuring," Greg said. Like that explained anything. Like that made it okay to gut a man's life in the time it takes to sip bad coffee. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at that number, 50%, as if maybe the ink would rearrange itself if I blinked hard enough. Spoiler, it didn't. I smiled. Or at least, I think I did. Not because I was okay, because sometimes you smile when you're so close to breaking that if you don't, you'll fall apart right there in front of them. And hell if I was going to give them that satisfaction. "I'll need 24 hours to review this," I said, voice even, like I hadn't just been punched in the gut. Linda nodded, relieved I wasn't flipping the table. Greg looked at his watch like he had better things to do. By the time I got to my car, the mask cracked. The tears hit before the door even shut. I sat there, in the underground parking garage, my forehead pressed to the steering wheel, breathing in sharp, panicked gulps, wondering how the hell I was going to explain this to my daughter, Emma. I should back up. I'm David Carter, 38, single dad to a whip-smart, sarcastic 14-year-old who's the best thing that ever happened to me. And until that meeting, I was a senior software engineer at Luminate Systems. Or at least, I thought I was. I'm telling you all this because maybe you've been there too. Maybe you know what it feels like to have the rug yanked out from under you by people you trusted. And if you have, if any of this sounds painfully familiar, I want you to stick around. Because what happened next? It's not just about revenge, it's about realizing your worth when the world tries to tell you you don't have any. So yeah, if you know what it feels like to be blindsided by betrayal, or if you just want to hear how one quiet guy flipped the script, go ahead, hit that like button, subscribe, or drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Trust me, you're gonna want to see how this ends. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's slow, silent, and absolutely devastating. If you had asked me a year ago where I saw myself, I would have told you something safe, something steady. Still at Luminate, still building things that matter. Because that's what it felt like back then, like it mattered. I wasn't just punching a clock, I was building something bigger, brick by brick, line by line of code. I started at Luminate when it was still a scrappy little cybersecurity firm no one had heard of. The kind of place where you're just as likely to fix the coffee machine as debug a server. There were only 30 of us then, small enough that you knew everyone's dog's name, everyone's kid's soccer schedule. Back then I wasn't just working a job, I was building a life. Emma was just a kid, a tornado of curls and questions and sticky fingers, and every hour I put in felt like I was building her future too. I missed things, sure. First grade plays, birthday parties, parent-teacher conferences, but I told myself it was temporary, that the sacrifice was worth it, that if I worked hard enough, stayed loyal enough, one day I could buy her a car for her 16th birthday, send her to the college of her dreams without blinking at the tuition. I was never the smartest guy in the room. Not flashy, not political. I wasn't the guy networking at happy hour or sucking up during quarterly reviews. I was the guy who stayed late when nobody asked, who picked up the slack without complaint. The guy who kept his head down and trusted that hard work would be enough. It wasn't. The thing about hard work is, in the wrong hands, it just makes you easy to exploit. And boy, did they exploit it. Over the years, I watched new faces climb past me. Guys who were loud and polished, who talked a big game but didn't know half of what I knew. Promotions I should have gotten went to people who couldn't troubleshoot their way out of a paper bag, but they looked good in a blazer and knew which VPs to laugh at the right jokes with. Still, I stayed. For Emma. For the house I bought after years of cramming into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment. For the health insurance that paid for her braces and her inhalers. And when the idea came to me, the one that could actually make a difference, not just for the company but for the whole damn industry, I poured everything I had into it, nights, weekends, holidays. I wasn't just chasing a promotion anymore. I was chasing a legacy, something Emma could point to one day and say, "My dad built that." I didn't realize it back then, but I was also painting a giant target on my back. The idea didn't come to me in some cinematic flash of genius. No lightning bolts, no eureka moment in the shower. It was quieter than that. Like a slow dawn creeping over a tired landscape, inevitable once you see it. It started with a pattern, an anomaly in the way security breaches were being detected, or rather missed. A flaw so basic, so obvious once you spotted it, that I couldn't believe no one else had. And that's the thing about innovation. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. At first I scribbled thoughts in the margins of my notebooks during endless meetings. Then I started staying late, working in the shadows long after everyone else had left. When the office lights clicked off one by one and the janitor gave me that "you" again, look, that's when the real work began. I wasn't supposed to be doing it, not officially. There were protocols, approval chains, hoops I was meant to jump through before even touching a line of code outside of assigned projects. But something told me if I asked permission, it would get watered down, picked apart, refined into mediocrity. Or worse, stolen before it had a chance to become anything. So I kept it quiet. I built the prototype on my own time, on a battered old laptop that had seen better days. Emma would sit across from me at the kitchen table, pretending to do homework but really doodling in the margins of her notebooks, glancing up every so often to ask, "Are you almost done, Dad?" "Almost," I'd say, smiling, even when I knew almost could be months away. It wasn't just about ambition anymore. It was about her, about the nights she fell asleep waiting for me to close the laptop, about the weekends we traded for dreams I hadn't even dared say out loud. When it was finally ready, a working prototype that could identify vulnerabilities faster and more accurately than anything on the market, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride. Real, bone-deep pride. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what everything has been for. I put together the presentation like a man building a shrine, every slide polished, every number triple-checked. I didn't sleep the night before I pitched it to the exec team. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing every word in my head. The next morning I wore my best suit, the one Emma insisted made me look like a boss. I stood in front of that polished mahogany table under the flickering fluorescent lights, and I laid out my heart piece by piece. They nodded, they smiled, they asked questions that made it sound like they were actually impressed. Greg clapped me on the back afterward and said, "This is big, David, real big." And for a moment, just a moment, I believed them. For a few days after the pitch, it was like walking on clouds. People who normally didn't know my name were stopping me in the hallway, giving me that nod, the kind that said, "You did something." Greg started looping me into meetings I was usually left out of. Linda from HR even sent one of those generic congratulatory emails that somehow felt like a warning in disguise. I told myself it was the start of something new, that maybe, finally, all the late nights, all the sacrifices were about to pay off. Emma joked that I'd become famous at work, and for once I let myself laugh without the usual knot of cynicism. But underneath the excitement, a small voice whispered, "Be careful." It started small. Tiny things you could almost excuse if you weren't paying attention. The way Greg stopped inviting me to follow-up meetings about the project. The way new faces from the C-suite started asking a lot of questions, but not to me. Once I passed the big conference room and saw the entire leadership team huddled inside, a diagram on the whiteboard that looked suspiciously familiar. My diagram. When I pushed the door open to ask if they needed me, Greg smiled that tight plastic smile and said, "We're just doing some high-level planning. We'll loop you in when we need your input." Input. Like I was an accessory to my own idea. Still, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were strategizing before bringing it back to me. Maybe it was just standard corporate posturing. Maybe. Weeks passed. The buzz around the office grew. Something big was coming, everyone said. Something that was going to put Luminate on the map. Greg started holding all-hands meetings, where he talked about innovation and disruption and thinking outside the box. He never mentioned my name. One afternoon, Emma and I were in the kitchen. She was half watching TV, half ignoring her algebra homework, when my phone buzzed with a company-wide email. Luminate Systems to announce revolutionary new cybersecurity platform. I clicked it open, read it. Read it again. Nowhere. Not in the headline, not in the body, not even in the fine print. Was there a mention of me? Not a word. No credit, no acknowledgement, no footnote. But the description of the platform, the architecture, the features, it was my work, word for word, bit for bit. I felt like the ground shifted beneath me, like someone had slipped the air right out of the room. Emma looked up and saw my face. "Dad, what's wrong?" I closed the laptop slowly, like it might explode if I moved too fast. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just work stuff." But inside, I wasn't smiling. I wasn't even breathing. Because deep down I knew. They weren't just taking the idea, they were taking everything. Silence is a strange thing. It's not just the absence of sound, it's the presence of something heavier, something colder. It fills the spaces where conversation used to live, settles into the cracks between people who once smiled when they saw you. That's what it felt like when I walked into the office the day after the announcement. Not a single congratulations, not even a glance my way. The people who used to wave or chat by the coffee machine suddenly found urgent reasons to be anywhere else. Even the receptionist, who always had a smile and a bad joke ready, barely looked up when I swiped my badge. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining it. I was being erased. Greg avoided me completely. If we passed each other in the hall, he'd look at his phone like it had just burst into flames. Meetings I was supposed to attend were suddenly rescheduled or downsized, without me. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how normal they made it seem. How everyone around me acted like this was just how things were done. Like I should have known better than to expect anything different. I tried to tell myself it was temporary. Maybe they were just waiting for the big announcement, for the press release to drop, for the launch party. Surely then they'd acknowledge my work. Give credit where it was due. Right? Days bled into weeks. Nothing changed. Every time I walked past that glass-walled conference room and saw my architecture diagram, now rebranded, reworded, whitewashed, I felt a little piece of myself chip away. Every memo about the new platform was like a slap I couldn't dodge. At home, Emma noticed, kids are sharper than we give them credit for. "You're quiet," she said one night over dinner, poking at her pasta. "Quieter than usual." "Just tired," I lied, twisting my fork through a knot of spaghetti I had no intention of eating. "You hate it there, don't you?" she said, not as a question, but as a fact. I didn't answer. Didn't have to. She pushed her plate away, frustrated. "Why don't you quit?" 14 years old, and she said it so simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. But it wasn't that simple. It never is. The mortgage, the medical bills, her college fund. All the invisible threads tying me to that place. "I can't," I said, softer than I intended. "You can't or you won't." I didn't have an answer to that either. Later that night, after Emma went to bed, I sat in the dark living room staring at nothing, feeling the weight of 9 years of loyalty pressing down on my chest like a boulder. I thought about all the birthday parties I missed, the soccer games, the parent-teacher nights. All the things I gave up, believing it would lead to something better. And now? Now I was a ghost in my own life, a placeholder, a line item to be moved or erased as they saw fit. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe I couldn't quit. But that didn't mean I had to stay silent. They say betrayal never comes from your enemies, and they're right. It comes from the people who shook your hand, who smiled at you in the break room, who said things like, "We're all family here." It was a Thursday when it all finally clicked. The email hit my inbox around 10:17 a.m., sandwiched between a system update memo and an invite to Greg's platform launch celebration. Subject line, Team Realignment Update. I knew that corporate doublespeak well enough. Realignment meant someone, or several someones, were about to get crushed under the wheels of progress. The email was short, clinical. Effective immediately, there would be a strategic restructuring of the cybersecurity division to better position Luminate for future growth. Roles were being evaluated to ensure alignment with company goals. My name wasn't mentioned, but I didn't need a neon sign to know what was coming. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Linda from HR. Meeting request, 2 p.m. No subject line, no agenda, just doom in calendar form. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. Every email, every Slack message, every knock at my door felt loaded, like the next breath could be the one that undid me. At 1:59, I stood outside the conference room, staring at the frosted glass. Behind it, I could make out Greg's silhouette. Linda's too. I knocked. Once. Sharp. Final. Greg smiled when I walked in. That fake, stretched tight smile he wore when he was lying or covering for someone. "David," he said, like we were old pals. "Thanks for coming." Linda gestured to the chair. I didn't sit. Couldn't. Greg cleared his throat, shuffled some papers he wasn't actually reading. "We're going through some changes," he said, as if I hadn't read the email, as if I didn't already know. "As part of that, we've had to make some difficult decisions." Linda slid a folder across the table. Déjà vu. Inside an offer. A 50% pay cut. New title. New responsibilities. All the work, half the pay, none of the credit. "If you'd like to accept these new terms, we'd be happy to have you stay on during the transition," Greg said. "And if I don't?" My voice was steady. I was proud of that. "Then we'll consider it a voluntary resignation," Linda chimed in, all crisp and pleasant like she was offering me coffee. I stared at the paper, the words swimming. 50%. Half. They didn't even try to sugarcoat it. This wasn't a demotion. It was an execution. They didn't want me to stay. They wanted me to quit, so they wouldn't have to fire me and risk unemployment claims, lawsuits, headlines. I was disposable. After everything, all the years, all the late nights, all the sacrifices, disposable. Greg leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head like he was proud of himself. "It's a good offer," he said, "considering the circumstances." The room was too small, the air too thick. I could hear my pulse thudding in my ears. I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because sometimes a smile is the only shield you have left. "I'll need 24 hours to consider," I said. Linda nodded, relieved. Greg smirked. They thought they'd won. They thought I'd go quietly, tail between my legs. They had no idea. I left that room walking on autopilot, my feet moving but my mind somewhere else entirely. 24 hours. That's what I asked for. But what could possibly change in 24 hours? The decision was already made, the paperwork drafted, the exit neatly prepared. I sat at my desk, staring at the computer screen without seeing anything. Around me, the office buzzed, as if nothing had happened. People typing, laughing, sipping burnt coffee from their chipped mugs. Business as usual, for them anyway. After a few minutes, or maybe an hour, time stopped meaning anything. I stood up and walked, not out of panic, not out of defeat, out of something colder, sharper. I needed answers. Greg's door was open. He was pretending to look busy, but he wasn't fooling anyone. His screen was black, probably had been for hours. "Got a minute?" I asked, voice calm, almost too calm. He looked up, feigning surprise. "Of course." I stepped in, closing the door behind me. "What's this really about?" I asked, cutting straight through the corporate garbage. Greg gave me a look, that tired managerial smirk that people wear when they think they have the upper hand. "We're realigning resources," he said, parroting the same script Linda had used. "Nothing personal." I almost laughed. "Nothing personal. That's the thing about betrayal. It's always personal. They just say it isn't so they can sleep at night. You and I both know this isn't about realignment," I said. "You launched my platform without my name on it. You're cutting my salary, pushing me to quit. So tell me, Greg, what's the real plan?" He leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers behind his head again. A move I was starting to loathe. "You did good work, David," he said. "But this—" He gestured vaguely to the window, to the city skyline beyond. "This is bigger than any one person. Bigger than any one person. Another empty platitude to paste over greed. You stole my work," I said, finally putting it into words. "And now you're cutting me out because you don't want to share the credit, or the profits." Greg didn't deny it. He didn't have to. "We're all part of the same team," he said instead, which was somehow worse. I stared at him, really looked at him. This man who would smile at me in the elevator and stab me in the back before the doors even closed. There was no apology coming, no admission, no redemption. Just the cold, hard truth. They had already moved on. I nodded once, sharply. "Thanks for your time." I left his office not because I was defeated, but because I finally understood something vital. I wasn't going to find justice here. If I wanted justice, if I wanted revenge, I was going to have to build it myself. I walked out of that building feeling like a man who had just watched his own funeral. The parking lot was half empty, the late afternoon sun bouncing off the hoods of cars that weren't mine. I slid behind the wheel of my old Honda, the one Emma always said smelled like too much coffee and not enough air freshener, and just sat there. For a long time I didn't move, didn't start the engine, just sat, hands slack on the steering wheel, heart pounding a slow, defeated rhythm against my ribs. What do you do when the thing you built, the thing you sacrificed for, is stolen right out from under you? When the people you trusted gut you with a smile and call it realignment, you break. That's what I did, right there in the parking lot, hidden from the world by tinted windows and pride. I broke. Ugly, heaving sobs that clawed their way out of my chest before I could stop them. Tears I hadn't cried when Emma's mum walked out. Tears I hadn't cried when I took out a second mortgage just to keep the lights on that one terrible winter. I cried because it wasn't fair, because loyalty was supposed to mean something, because hard work was supposed to pay off. But mostly I cried because of Emma, because I had promised her better, and now I had nothing. When the sobs finally ran dry, I sat there breathing in shallow, broken gulps. The world felt quieter now, like everything had dulled, the colors, the sounds, even the anger. But beneath that numbness something stirred, a memory, a spark. I reached for the glove compartment, fingers fumbling until they found the manila folder tucked underneath, expired insurance cards, and half-melted pens. I pulled it out, hands shaking, and flipped it open. There it was, the thing they didn't know about, the thing they hadn't counted on, the patent. Months ago, when the idea was just a rough sketch in a coffee-stained notebook, I had filed for a provisional patent, quietly, carefully, on my own time and with my own money, not because I didn't trust Luminate back then, but because I didn't trust corporations, period. They had legal teams and policies and NDAs. I had a piece of paper with the government seal on it, and a filing number that said in no uncertain terms, "This is mine." Greg and his cronies could rebrand it, relaunch it, resell it, but they couldn't erase that. I sat there, staring at the patent, feeling something shift deep inside me. A click, a gear falling into place. They thought they had won. They thought I would roll over and take it. They were wrong. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with the lights low and the patent spread out in front of me. The house was quiet, except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the soft whir of the refrigerator. Outside, the world carried on, cars rushing by, neighbors walking their dogs, a plane blinking overhead. Unaware that somewhere inside this small, aging house, a man was deciding not to be a victim, I stared at the document like it was a life raft. Maybe it was. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a guarantee. Corporations like Luminate had more lawyers than I had socks. They could drag a case out for years, bury me in motions and paperwork until I couldn't breathe, let alone fight. But they had one problem. I was right. The prototype, the architecture, the algorithms had been my work. Created on my own time, on my own equipment, with no contracts signed, no clauses binding it to the company. They could bluff, threaten, intimidate, but the truth was etched into that paper in black and white. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. I opened my laptop, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts, and started doing what any good engineer does when faced with a problem. I researched. I read case law, intellectual property statutes, horror stories and success stories. I found names of attorneys who specialized in tech patents. Big names, small firms, boutique outfits that only took cases they knew they could win. By 2 a.m. I had a shortlist. By 3 a.m. I had an email drafted. Concise, factual, desperate without sounding desperate. I attached scans of the patent, timelines of development, emails showing the progression of the idea without corporate involvement. Before I hit send, I hesitated. My finger hovered over the trackpad, trembling. Was I really about to do this? To go to war with the company that paid my mortgage, my daughter's braces, our groceries? I thought about Emma, about the look on her face when she said, "You hate it there, don't you?" I thought about the years I spent giving more than I got, believing loyalty would protect me, believing hard work was armor. I thought about Greg's smug smile, and then I clicked send. I shut the laptop, leaned back in the chair, and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back. The funny thing about burning bridges, sometimes you don't realize until the flames are high that you never needed the bridge to begin with. The next morning came heavy, like a weight pressing down on my chest, before my feet even touched the floor. I got Emma off to school, the usual routine, autopilot. She didn't notice anything different. Or maybe she did and just didn't say anything. Kids are smart like that. They know when to leave you space. When the house was finally quiet again, I sat back down at the kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me, waiting for something. A reply, a rejection, a sign. Around 10:15 a.m. it came. Inbox, one new message. I opened it and held my breath. It was short, just a few lines, but it might as well have been a battle cry. David, thanks for reaching out. I reviewed your documentation. Very strong case. Are you available for a call this afternoon? It was from Andrea Keller, one of the top IP attorneys on the East Coast, someone whose client list looked like a Fortune 500 reunion, someone who didn't take cases she couldn't win. I booked the call for 2 p.m. and spent the next few hours pacing the house like a caged animal, heart slamming against my ribs with every step. At exactly 2 cow, the phone rang. David Carter, a crisp voice asked. That's me. Let's get right into it, she said. No small talk, no fluff. I liked her already. I walked her through everything, the idea, the development, the presentation, the betrayal. She listened without interrupting, the occasional click of a keyboard, the only sign she was still there. When I finished, she said, Well, David, it's clear you've been wronged. The provisional patent is strong. Your documentation is thorough. They'll try to intimidate you, of course. Companies like Luminate always do. But here's the thing, Dice. They made a fatal error. What error? I asked, gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. They launched a product built on your intellectual property, without your consent and without securing rights to it. That's infringement, plain and simple. I exhaled slowly, the weight on my chest lifting just a little. They'll offer a settlement, she continued, but with the timing, the scale, and the documentation you have, we could go for much more. How much more? She named a number. It was obscene, enough to pay off the house, Emma's college tuition, and still leave me with the kind of cushion most people only dream about, enough to make Luminate bleed. I sat there, stunned, numb. Are you in? She asked, voice steady, professional, surgical. I thought about Greg, about Linda, about every handshake and back pat that came with a knife between the ribs. I thought about Emma and the future I could finally give her. Not someday, not maybe, but now. I'm in, I said. Andrea's voice barely changed, but I could hear the faintest hint of satisfaction. Good. Let's get started. I hung up and stared out the window at the empty street. They thought they had buried me. They didn't know I was a seed. The funny thing about big decisions is how small they feel at first. Just a few words on a call, just a click of a mouse, just a deep breath. But the ripple, the after, that's where the weight really hits you. After I hung up with Andrea, I didn't celebrate, didn't punch the air or scream or pour myself a drink. I sat there, still, almost scared to move, like the whole thing might vanish if I acknowledged it too soon. But it didn't vanish, it solidified, settled into my bones. I had a plan. The first thing I did was pull every piece of evidence I had, every email, every text, every old sketch and napkin scribble, every draft file, source code log and timestamp. I archived them, backed them up 3 times, encrypted copies, and stashed them on different drives. I wasn't just building a case, I was fortifying a castle, because the second Luminate got wind of this, they'd come after me. Not physically, of course. No, corporations don't need fists. They have lawyers and policies and armies of HR reps with "we wish you all the best" emails locked and loaded. I knew their playbook. I'd seen them use it on others who dared to push back. Sudden reviews of your past work, phishing expeditions into your emails, rumors whispered just loud enough to poison your name. But this time, it wouldn't work. This time, I wasn't just prepared. I was armed. While I gathered my evidence, Andrea's office was drafting the cease and desist letter. Not a slap on the wrist. A full-on legal missile aimed right at Luminate's shiny, self-congratulatory facade. It would accuse them, in no uncertain terms, of patent infringement. It would demand an immediate halt to sales, distribution, and marketing of the stolen platform, and it would lay out the consequences if they refused, the kind of numbers that make CEOs lose sleep and shareholders panic. I smiled for real this time, a small, dangerous smile. They thought I was powerless, just another cog they could grind down and replace. They didn't realize they'd backed a cornered man into a wall. And the thing about cornered men, we stopped being afraid. The rest of the day was a blur of logistics, calls with Andrea's team, scanning and uploading documents, reviewing drafts of the letter. By the time Emma got home, I was exhausted but lighter than I'd felt in months. She dropped her backpack by the door and flopped onto the couch, grabbing the remote. "How was school?" I asked. She shrugged. "Fine." "How was work?" I paused, considering. "Different," I said, and meant it. She didn't press, just cranked up the volume on some terrible reality show and settled in. I watched her for a moment, my kid, my reason, my anchor, and felt a surge of something fierce and primal and unbreakable. They had no idea who they were messing with. The next few days were a blur of movement. During office hours, I went through the motions, showed up, nodded at the right times, pretended like the offer from HR was still under consideration. Greg even stopped by my cubicle once, giving me that smug look, the one that said, "See? You're staying in line." I nodded back, smiled, let him believe whatever he needed to believe. But at night, I worked. Quietly, methodically, ruthlessly. I combed through old emails, lining up the timeline like a forensic surgeon. The first drafts of my idea, the dates they were created. The first time I casually mentioned the project in team meetings, the lack of any assignment documentation, tying it to Luminate systems. I found calendar invites, meeting notes, even audio recordings of our early brainstorming sessions. Legal and above board. Our office automatically recorded and archived those meetings for quality assurance. They'd forgotten about them. I hadn't. I listened to one late at night, the tinny playback filling the silence of the kitchen. There was my voice outlining the architecture, clear, detailed, and there was Greg responding not with questions, but with nods and ahas, like he didn't understand half of what I was saying. There it was, proof that not only had I developed the idea independently, but that I had explained it, in my own words, before they ever laid claim to it. I pulled files from my personal laptop, the one they couldn't touch. I saved copies to encrypted drives, tucked flash drives into places no auditor would think to check, a hollowed-out book on the shelf, a fake power strip in the garage. Paranoia? Maybe. But when you're going to war with people who think loyalty is a weakness, paranoia is just another name for common sense. Andrea's team was working in parallel, preparing the formal notice. It wasn't just a cease and desist anymore. They were building a full legal claim, one that would hit Luminate like a freight train at full speed. Patent infringement, theft of intellectual property, breach of implied contract. The list went on. When Andrea called to review the documents, her voice was calm, surgical. "They're going to push back," she warned. "They'll threaten, bluff, maybe even countersue." "Let them," I said. "You need to be ready." "I am," because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every late night I'd sacrificed, every soccer game I missed, every birthday dinner reheated in the microwave because I was too busy chasing a promotion that was never going to come. It was about Emma, about showing her that standing up for yourself isn't arrogance, it's survival. When I hung up the phone, I felt a strange calm settle over me, a stillness, like the moment before a storm breaks. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I was ready to remind them that some people can't be bought, can't be bullied. Some people fight back, and this time I wasn't fighting fair. The letter went out on a Wednesday. Andrea's firm handled the delivery. A thick envelope stamped with the kind of legalese that makes corporate lawyers break into a cold sweat. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. No deniability. By noon, I got the confirmation, delivered and signed for by someone at Luminate's legal department. Now came the hard part. Waiting. I went to work the next day like nothing had happened. Same sad coffee, same sad cubicle, Same sad Greg pretending he was some kind of visionary leader while walking around with my stolen idea like a trophy. But beneath the surface everything had changed. I could feel it, the tension thrumming in the walls, the whispered conversations in glass-walled offices, the sudden, unexplained disappearances of mid-level managers into closed-door meetings. I wasn't stupid. I knew what was happening. They were scrambling. At 3:17 p.m., my phone buzzed unknown number. I stepped outside to answer it, standing in the parking lot with the sun burning a hole through my shirt. "This is David," a voice, clipped and sharp. "Mr. Carter, this is Thomas Green from Luminate Systems Legal Department. We received your letter." Silence. "And? We'd like to discuss this matter privately, see if we can come to an amicable resolution." I smiled. Small. Cold. "I'm listening. We propose a meeting in person tomorrow." Typical. They wanted to get me in a room, lean on me, wear me down. But this wasn't my first rodeo. "I'll have my attorney with me," I said. A beat. I could almost hear him recalculating on the other end. "Of course." I hung up and stared at the phone for a moment, feeling the weight of it in my hand. This was real. No turning back now. That night, after Emma went to bed, I pulled the old patent folder out again and sat with it at the kitchen table, tracing the embossed seal with my thumb. It wasn't just a document. It was a shield, a weapon. It was proof that no matter how much they tried to erase me, rewrite me, discard me, I existed. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. Anger burns too hot, too fast. This was colder, deeper, like a riptide pulling you under. Slow, relentless, impossible to fight once it has you. They had thought I'd be easy to silence, easy to scare. They were about to learn something very important. Some men don't go quietly. Some men make sure you regret ever trying to bury them. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I was going to make damn sure they learned that lesson the hard way. The next morning felt different, heavier, like the air itself knew what was coming. I dressed carefully. Not just a shirt and tie, armor. The good suit, the one Emma said, made me look like someone important. It wasn't about looking sharp. It was about walking into that building like I belonged there, like I wasn't the one who should be afraid. Andrea met me outside, tall, composed, with a leather portfolio tucked under one arm, and a look on her face that said she'd won battles much bigger than this one, and she wasn't planning on losing today. We walked through the revolving doors together. The lobby was the same as always. Polished floors, fake ferns, that sterile smell of recycled air and corporate ambition. But today, it felt like enemy territory. Greg was waiting in the conference room, flanked by Thomas Green, the company's legal bulldog. Linda from HR sat awkwardly off to the side, clutching a notebook she probably wouldn't write anything in. I took a seat across from them, Andrea at my side, silent and still. Thomas cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Keller, let's get right to it." He slid a document across the table, a settlement offer. Low 6 figures, confidentiality agreement attached, of course, no admission of wrongdoing. "We believe this is a fair resolution," Thomas said, with the oily confidence of a man used to getting his way. I didn't touch the paper. Andrea leaned forward, voice calm but lethal. "This offer is an insult. You've infringed on Mr. Carter's intellectual property. We have clear evidence, the patent, timestamps, development logs, meeting recordings. You launched a product built on his work without his permission or credit." Thomas didn't flinch. "The company will contest that." Andrea smiled. Slow, sharp. A shark in open water. "Good, because if we go to court, discovery will include all internal emails, meeting minutes, development documents. Every scrap of evidence showing when, where and how the platform was built, and who built it." Greg shifted in his chair. Linda looked like she wanted to disappear into the carpet. "And let's be clear," Andrea continued, "this isn't just a lawsuit. This is a PR nightmare. Headlines about Luminate stealing from its own engineers. Investor confidence rattled. Stock prices dipping, customers reconsidering contracts." Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew she wasn't bluffing. "Here's what's going to happen," Andrea said, sliding her own document across the table. "Full settlement, high 6 figures, public acknowledgement of Mr. Carter's contribution, immediate cessation of all sales and marketing related to the current platform, And no confidentiality clause. Thomas paled. Greg's jaw clenched. No confidentiality? Thomas asked, voice strained. That's right. Mr. Carter has no interest in being silenced. The room went quiet. You could feel the weight of it settling over everyone. Greg finally spoke, voice low and bitter. You're making a mistake, David. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I didn't feel anger anymore, just pity. No, Greg, I said. I'm fixing one. Andrea slid the document closer. You have 48 hours to respond. After that, we file. Thomas nodded stiffly. We'll be in touch. We stood. Andrea shook hands, professional, controlled. I didn't bother, just gave Greg one last look, not of hatred, but of closure. And then we walked out, past the fake ferns, past the security desk, through the revolving doors, into the bright, blinding sun. I took a deep breath, the first real one in what felt like months. This wasn't over yet. But the battle? The battle had just begun. The next few days felt surreal. While Luminate scrambled behind closed doors, Andrea's team kept the pressure on. There were no threats, no dramatics, just a steady, unrelenting march toward accountability. Like a tide rolling in, slow and unstoppable. Meanwhile, I started thinking about what was next. Because here's the thing about revenge. Real revenge isn't just about making them pay. It's about moving on, thriving, showing them they couldn't break you. I started taking calls, quiet ones at first, friends of friends, former colleagues, a few recruiters who'd heard through the grapevine that I was exploring new opportunities, and then came the call that changed everything. A tech startup, one I'd admired from a distance for years, wanted to talk. They'd heard about what happened, the lawsuit, the innovation that sparked it all. They weren't scared off. They were impressed. I met with their CEO, a guy named Sam, at a little coffee shop far from the glass towers and corporate jargon I was used to. Sam was younger than me, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, but when he spoke, it was clear he wasn't playing games. We know what you built, he said, cutting straight to the point. We know your value. We don't care about the lawsuit. We care about what you can do next. There it was. Simple, respectful. No empty promises, no smoke and mirrors. And the offer he slid across the table. It wasn't just a salary, it was freedom, creative control, equity, a real stake in something, not just a paycheck with golden handcuffs attached. I didn't say yes immediately. I took the contract home, sat with it, thought about Emma, about all the nights I'd spent missing pieces of her life while chasing validation from people who never really cared. When I finally signed, it wasn't with shaking hands and fear, it was with certainty. I gave my notice at Luminate via my lawyer. Formal, clinical, final. Andrea forwarded their response, one sentence. We accept Mr. Carter's resignation, effective immediately. No fanfare, no goodbyes, just a quiet acknowledgement that they had lost. And as if on cue, the fallout began. News leaked, not from me, of course, but these things have a way of slipping out. Industry forums buzzed with rumors about the lawsuit, the stolen idea, the sudden departure of the guy who'd built the company's revolutionary platform. Clients started asking questions, partners started hesitating, and Luminate, they started bleeding. Key accounts were put under review, stock prices wobbled, investors whispered. It was beautiful. Not because it was loud or explosive, but because it was slow. I didn't have to lift a finger. Just like a machine programmed years ago, set in motion by their own greed. And me? I was already gone, already building something new, already becoming something they could never touch. Because the best revenge isn't about destruction, it's about resurrection. If you've never watched a company implode from the outside, let me tell you, it doesn't happen the way you think. It's not dramatic. No sudden explosion, no CEO storming out with cardboard boxes. It's quieter, slower, like a crack forming in a dam, invisible at first, until one day the whole thing just gives way. I wasn't there to see it firsthand, but word travels fast in the tech world. First came the resignations. Not just the grunts and foot soldiers, the big names. People who had been at Luminate for years started jumping ship, quietly updating their LinkedIn profiles and slipping out the side door before the rumors got too loud. Then came the clients. One by one, the big accounts started to pull back, re-evaluating partnerships, postponing renewals, corporate speak for We don't trust you anymore. And without the clients, the money started to dry up. By the time the story hit the industry blogs, former Luminate engineer sues over stolen IP, it was all over. The article didn't name me directly, thanks to Andrea's careful handling, but anyone who was paying attention could connect the dots, especially when they dug a little deeper and realized the stolen project, the platform they had spent millions to launch, dead in the water, no new updates, no patches, no roadmaps, just silence. Because the heart of it, the architecture, the code, the vision, had always been mine, and without me it was hollow. Greg, he stepped down a few months later to pursue other opportunities. Linda disappeared shortly after. No LinkedIn update, no farewell post, just gone, like a bad memory finally erased. Luminate tried to recover, of course. They always do. Rebranded, restructured, launched half-baked projects under new leadership. But the trust was gone. And in tech, when the trust goes, everything else follows. I didn't gloat, didn't post cryptic updates or drop hints in interviews. I didn't need to. Because real revenge isn't loud. It's watching the walls crumble around the people who thought they were untouchable, and realizing you don't even have to lift a finger. I was busy anyway, building something new, something better, working with people who actually understood the value of loyalty, of integrity. I started making it home for dinner every night. Emma and I went to her soccer games, her debate tournaments, her school plays, things I used to miss because I was too busy chasing someone else's approval. Now I was chasing something different. Peace, freedom, self-respect. Funny how none of those things come with a corporate title or a six-figure bonus. Funny how, once you taste them, you realize how starving you've been all along. It took almost a year of filings, counter-filings, strategy sessions, and the slow grind of a legal machine that never moves as fast as you want it to. But some things are worth the wait. The settlement came down on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Fitting, really. Storm clouds gathering outside my window, a gentle tap-tap-tap on the glass as if the world itself was leaning in to listen. Andrea called me herself. "They're offering full settlement," she said, calm as ever. "Everything we asked for. High six figures. Public acknowledgement of your contribution. Full cease and desist on the platform." I didn't say anything at first, just sat there, the words sinking in. "They knew they couldn't win," she continued. "Their own discovery materials basically handed us the case on a silver platter. Emails, memos, even meeting transcripts where they discussed launching without crediting you." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "What's next?" I asked. "You sign, we close." "They cut the check, they issue the public statement, and then—" She paused, and for the first time in a year, I heard the faintest smile in her voice. "You move on. Richer, smarter, free." I thanked her, hung up, sat there staring at the wall for a long time. When Emma got home from school, I told her, she dropped her backpack, looked at me with those sharp, curious eyes that never missed anything. "So, you won?" she asked, cautious. I nodded. "Yeah, kiddo, we won." She smiled, big, wide, the kind of smile that lights up a whole room. "Does that mean you're, like, rich now?" I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. Something like that. But it wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about the principle, about standing up when it would have been easier to stay down, about proving, to myself, to Emma, to everyone, that you don't have to accept being treated like you're expendable. That night, we celebrated. Nothing fancy, just pizza, a movie, a lot of laughing. The kind of night I used to miss because I was stuck in some sterile conference room, chasing approval from people who would have sold me out for a quarterly bonus. And as we sat there, Emma's head resting on my shoulder, the smell of pepperoni and melted cheese filling the room, I realized something. I hadn't just survived. I had won. Not just the settlement, not just the acknowledgement. I had won my life back. And Luminate. They were a cautionary tale now, a whispered warning in boardrooms and business schools, because you can steal an idea, you can even steal a platform, but you can't steal integrity, you can't steal grit, you can't steal the kind of quiet, relentless determination that looks a betrayal in the face and says, "Not today, not ever again." It's been 2 years since that rainy Thursday, 2 years since I walked away from the wreckage of what I thought was success. 2 years since I stopped living for performance reviews and started living for something real. And here's the thing they don't tell you about revenge, the real kind, the kind that sticks. It's not loud, it's not flashy, it's quiet, it's waking up without a pit in your stomach. It's picking up your daughter from school and not having to apologize for being late. Again, it's dinners at home, science fairs, late-night talks about boys and college applications and life. It's building something new, not just a career but a life that feels like it fits, like it was made for you, not for someone else's bottom line. I stayed with the startup, the one that saw my value before the dust even settled. We built something incredible, not because we were chasing quarterly earnings or trying to impress investors, but because we believed in it. They gave me a team, real people, smart, hungry, honest, and they let me lead them without politics, without fear, just work and vision and trust. And Emma, she's thriving, straight A's, soccer team captain, a kid who believes, really believes, that her dad is someone worth looking up to. Every once in a while, I still hear whispers about Luminate. New leadership, new strategies, desperate attempts to claw their way back to relevance, but I don't think about them much, because the truth is, they're not my story anymore. They're just the prologue, the part you read to understand how far the hero had to fall before he could rise. And me, I'm not angry, I'm not bitter, I'm not even vengeful, I'm free. If you're still watching this, if you've made it this far, maybe you're sitting where I was. Maybe you're being overlooked, underpaid, disrespected. Maybe you're wondering if it's worth it to stand up. Here's what I'll tell you. It is. You're worth more than the people who fail to see you. You're stronger than the ones who try to break you. And sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying what hurt you. It's walking away. It's building something better. It's living well, not in spite of them, but because of you. All it takes is one decision. One moment of courage, one phone call that changes everything. Because the real revenge, it's never about getting back at them. It's about getting back to yourself. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in.